What's up, guys? It's Alex back again, and I am here today. Excuse me for one moment, because I need to get up my notes. There we go. I'm here today to give you kind of a roundup, I guess, of 2018. Sort of a mixed bag of a year for me. The beginning part of the year was alright. Nothing really happened. Nothing really happened in the winter, I guess. Spring, a few things happened. I went to, in the spring, what did I do? One concert. I turned 21 this year, which was a big moment, I guess, for me. There were two concerts in the summer that I went to. Then there was one in October that I went. Was it October? I think. Yeah, it was October that I went to. So I'll talk about those. I'm not going to be showing some of my best pickups of this year because there's just too many pickups to choose from. I think my record collection this year is probably about doubled in size. And that's all down to me just being addicted to picking up vinyl. And I always say to myself, I'm going to slow down on the pickups. But obviously I haven't been able to because my collection has just doubled in size. So yeah, I can't pick, but I did try and do an expensive album every month. I kind of failed at that because I could only do 4 months, and then my budget kind of started to catch up on me, and so I kind of had to stop that. But I'll take you through the 4 albums that I picked up this month for what I called my record of the month. There is a playlist of it on my channel. If you guys want to check it out, I'll leave a link up in the top corner and it down in the description as well. But yeah, I grabbed, the first one I grabbed was Ice Cube's War and Peace Volume 2, the Peace Disc. I said in that video it was probably my favourite Ice Cube album. After listening to it and going back over his the other albums in his discography, I would disagree with that statement. There's some standout tracks on that album for sure, but lyrically it's not his best album. With the beats, it's not his best album. It's actually one of his weaker albums now I'm listening to it, but I still really like it. I still think the song Hello is probably one of my favourite album opening tracks he's ever put out there. So for that reason, I think Ice Cube War and Peace Volume 2 was a great pickup. A Mo-Fi pressing of Stevie Wonder's Talking Book, my personal favourite Stevie Wonder album, and that probably would be my favourite pickup if I was to pick one. And that was right back at the beginning of the year. I thought it sounded great. It's not one I'm going to be pulling out all the time to play because I do have an original pressing. I have original pressings of most of Stevie's albums, the ones I have anyway. But yeah, I thought it sounded great. It was you can definitely hear the difference between the two pressings. But as far as it goes, I don't think I'm pulling the Mo-Fi pressing out to play it too often, just because I'm not a big fan of remastered stuff, but I really like Stevie's album, so I had to grab a copy of Talking Book on Mo-Fi. I picked up a copy of Animals by Pink Floyd. Now, to some people, that may be a cheap album, but in my area in particular, anytime you see Pink Floyd, if it's not Relics, Dark Side of the Moon, or one other one. There's another one that's always quite cheap. If it's not Relics, Dark Side of the Moon, or I can't think of it right now. Yeah, no, I can't think of it right now, but there's not many Pink Floyd albums that people ask cheaply for, and so Animals is always an expensive album anytime I see it. So I had to grab it when I found it, and it was within my budget, so I picked it up. And yeah, it was a great pickup. He's probably my favourite Pink Floyd album now. I toss up between that and Dark Side of the Moon, but it don't matter. And then the last thing I picked up was Smashing Pumpkins' first album, Gish. I've been really getting into Smashing Pumpkins this year. I know they had a new album out this year. It's one that I didn't get a chance to check out. Unfortunately, I really wish I would have, because I'm really liking their first 3 albums at least. I'm loving their first 3 albums. So I did have to grab an original press of their first album, which does sound incredible, by the way. I know people say hype the reissues a bit, but I really did. Excuse me. Don't know where that came from. We're not cutting that out though. We're keeping this raw. Last video of the year. We're keeping in the sneeze. But yeah, what I was saying. Oh yeah, the first European pressing of Smashing Pumpkins, Gish, I think sounds incredible. So I did, of course, keep that in. Excuse me again. What else do we have? I went to 4 concerts this year. I really wish I would have gone to more. I did have the opportunity to go to more concerts, but I just stuck with the 4 because, like I said, my budget. Until I started DJing about midway through this year at a nightclub, my budget really stayed at a lower rate. And then I started DJing, it started going higher. So it's fluctuated throughout the year, but for me, I think this year's been, like I said, a bit of a mixed bag. The 4 concerts I went to, the first one was Soons, that I went to back in April. I didn't get any footage from that show, but I do have some footage to show you from someone else's angle, which they're not actually too far from where I was standing anyway, which is just fine. But given that it's the concert I remember the least out of all 4 of these, because I only really knew 2 songs from this band when going into it, and they only performed one of the ones I knew. I came out of it loving them, and if you don't know Soons, they're sort of primal, screamy, sort of indie. They're an indie rock. They're an indie alternative band, and they are very reminiscent of like a Primal Scream sort of sound. I do really like Soons now, though. It's just a shame the concept from them that I remember the least about. So next time they're over, hopefully I get to see them live again, because I would love to see them live again. In June, I went to see Vancouver Sleep Clinic, and despite what their name would say, they're not from Vancouver. They're from, wait, it wasn't June, sorry, it was July. It was July I saw them, July 6th of this year, but yeah, they're not from Vancouver, like I was saying, they're actually from Australia. They put on a decent show. I'll say that. Their show was a little shorter than I would have liked, but we did get to meet the band after the show, so it was a really, really good show. It was definitely one that was worth watching. I may go and see them again next time they're over, but I don't know. Maybe I'll see what other concerts are happening at the time. Because they're not the first band I'm going to jump in line to see again. But if I get the chance to meet them again, then that would be great. And then after that, in September, I got to see my favourite band live, Arctic Monkeys. And it was a bit of a surprise for me because I didn't know I had a ticket until the day before the concert. It was kind of a last minute thing, and I had a guy on the inside, and we met a guy who had a contact. We met a guy I met a guy who does ticket sales on the inside of the all around the world sort of thing. So he could get me a last minute ticket. He had one ticket left for the Arctic Monkeys gig, and he let me have it. So that was a big surprise for me. my highlight of the year. I was front row to see my favourite band live, and oof, it was just a phenomenal piece of work. They put on a fantastic show. And the last concert I went to was in October, I think. Was it October? No, it would have been the last concert I went to would have been November of this year, and it was Alt J, and actually they put on this probably my second favourite concert gig of this year. Being the band out of this group I probably like the least. I love their first album, and then there's bits and bobs off their next 3 albums that I like. But they pretty much performed the whole of their first album anyway, which is alright. But the light show was incredible. They sounded incredible, and even though I was in their hometown to see them live, and the crowd was just great. They put on a really good show, and it was one that I will probably remember for a long time. You may notice after I talked about each one of those that there was a little clip from each or two from each gig. Only Soon's was not mine. Like I said, I didn't manage to get any footage from that gig, but the rest I managed to get loads of footage from, and I really did enjoy it, each one. But it just comes down to which one I remember most, and for me Arctic Monkeys will be one I remember for a really long time. 2018 was a good year for movies as well. I managed to catch a lot of classic movies, a lot of movies I missed from last year, but I also managed to catch a few from this year that I was wanting to check out. And Jeff, I know you're watching this. Aquaman was one of my favourite movies, but I don't want to see any more slander about Aquaman on your Facebook. It's a good job we're friends, because otherwise I'd be hunting you down right now. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, we're all entitled to our opinions. I loved Aquaman. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but for me, it was a top 10 movie for sure. It would have been in my top 10 movies if I was rating movies and whatnot. I really enjoyed it. Great cinema experience. Looks fantastic. Great cast. I loved it. I was almost in tears, to be honest with you. And yes, like I said, I managed to catch movies from last year, and just movies I've missed over the past however many years movies have been going for, including some classics. And I've even got some movies lined up for tonight. Or for the rest of the day, I should say, because I don't really have many plans for the rest of the day, other than making this video. So yeah, that's it. I got a lot of movies. What did I catch? I think Fallout, Mission Impossible, was my first cinema experience this year, and I saw that twice in theaters. I loved it that much. Venom I saw, which I thought was okay. There was some plot, there was some gaps in the logic and the timeline, or some holes I should say in the logic and the timeline, but it was still decent. Fantastic Beasts, Crimes of Grindelwald I managed to catch. Again, that was okay. I need to rewatch it again because we did have people behind us talking through the movie the whole time. And then at the end of the year I managed to catch Creed 2, I managed to catch Aquaman, and I watched one more. I saw Incredibles 2, A Quiet Place. I loved A Quiet Place. And I'm sure there's one more in theaters that I watched. No, I think that was it. I do think that was it, but I had a great year for movies. I'm just going to say that. But we're not here to talk about movies. We are here to talk about music, and when it comes to albums of 2018, 2017 for me was a better year. I will be honest. I don't think the music from this year connected with me as much as it did in 2017. And that's a real shame to say that, because there were a lot of good albums this year. And some I didn't even check out. Smashing Pumpkins, I really wish I would have checked out their new album, because that was fantastic. It would have been nice to see them come back. Eric Clapton's new album, Merry Xmas Everyone. When I said I wanted a new Eric Clapton album at the end of last year, that is not what I had in mind. I really want to see a new album from him next year. I really want to see, I mean, I know we're probably not going to get it, but a new Stevie Wonder album I would love to see. A new album from The Cure I would love to see. Maybe even a new James Taylor or Paul Simon album, as they were touring this year. There's just loads I would love to see. But yeah, let's get on with. But anyway, as I was saying, I do have a top 10. I do have a top 10 albums of this year, and it was a very hard list for me to make this year, because out of all the albums I listened to, it's just a matter of picking out the ones that I thought were really, really good and worth putting in a top 10. Obviously last year it was a lot harder, because there were so many different albums and good albums that I loved, a bit more than this year, unfortunately. But let's get into it, starting off with the honourable mentions. Def Cab for Cuties, Thank You for Today album. Classic sound of Def Cab for Cutie, but unfortunately just a bit too repetitive for me. A very good listening album. I'm not going to put that down. That's why it's in my honourable mentions. But because there's no standout tracks for me, I can't put it in the top 10. Travis Scott's Astro World, my favourite project from him, and while it lacks a little bit lyrically, the beats on this are very good, the structures are phenomenal, and even the guest appearances are really good, and I was surprised. And this is probably the first time I'll ever say this, but I really enjoyed the cameo that Drake made on this album. I'm not a Drake fan, but I really liked his appearance on that album. David Byrne's American Utopia. I don't have physical copies of all of these to show you guys, but the ones I do have I'll show you. And this album, at first it didn't really connect with me. Brian Eno does a couple of tracks on this album, but he doesn't produce the whole thing. There are some standout tracks though, like I Dance Like This, Every Day's a Miracle, and It's Not Dark Up Here. Like I said, this album didn't connect with me at first, but I pre-ordered it blind just because I was a big Talking Heads fan, or I am a big Talking Heads fan, so to see David Byrne have a new album out, it was good for me. I did enjoy that one after a few listens. Method Man's Meth Lab Season 2, The Lithium. I don't have a physical copy of that to show you because it's not even out on vinyl yet. Big surprise album, was not expecting it. But what a phenomenal album that was. It was a great comeback from Method Man. I just haven't had enough time to really appreciate it, but Killing the Game was the standout track on that one for me. And then Ice Cube's new album, Everything's Corrupt. Again, no physical copies of it to show you, but great comeback album. It just came a little bit too late because he's been working on this album for years, and by the time he announced it this year, the excitement had pretty much gone for me, so all I said was, well, it's about time. But I still enjoyed the album. Classic Ice Cube sound. Really does throw me back to his better work, like the Death Certificate days. Yeah, Death Certificate and The Predator, those type of days when he was in his prime, really takes me back to then, so had to give that an honourable mention. But let's move into the top 10. I mean, there would have been more. Nas, I wish I could have put him on here, but again, I didn't really like that album as much as I've liked everything else by Nas, so I couldn't even put it in my honourable mentions. But enough about that. Let's get into my top 10, and again, there will be a few here that I don't have physical copies of to show you. But let's get into this, starting off with number 10 for me, and that was While Nothing, Indigo. While this is like Death Cab for Cutie, it's a good listening album. I think this year for me, on the chilled sort of thing, chilled music, it's definitely been one of those years when chilled music sort of taken over. But yeah, this album for me had some standout tracks, unlike the Death Cab for Cutie, which is why it's in here over the Death Cab for Cutie album. Letting Go, I thought was a very good track, very good opener. Wheel of Misfortune, Shallow Water, and Even Flawed Translation, I thought were all fantastic songs on this album. So for me, this album, while it's still chilled and still a nice album to put on in the background, it still has some standout tracks for when you're really giving it that intent listen. So that is making my number 10. In number 9, and it really does pain me to put this artist this low on my list, because he is my favourite rapper, Kamikaze, Eminem, or Eminem by Kamikaze by Eminem. He is my favourite rapper. He's not had an album this good in a long time, and so when he dropped this, I was almost floored when he went in on this album. The Ringer, the first track, it's 5 minutes long, and in that whole track, he pretty much just goes at everybody who's big right now. And throughout this album, he takes things and just really does wonders for it. I mean, there's one song on here I'm not a big fan of. That's Nice Guy. Lyrically, it's great, but I don't connect with that one as much. Everything else on here is really, really good. He even disses Dr. Dre and Paul Rosenberg on this album, who are two people he's really close with. I mean, let me try and name a few who he disses. Off the top of my head, there's Dr. Dre, there's Paul Rosenberg, there's Trippie Redd, Lil Yachty, Tyler the Creator, 5ix9ine, and that's just naming a few off the top of my head. But this was a really good surprise album, and unfortunately, I have to put it this low because, I mean, he even disses his previous work on this album. But again, with this album, it's still not his best work. He does what he does best and goes at everybody who's popular right now, like goes at pop culture, but he does it to such a modern twang that some of the beats on this may flack a little bit. Obviously there's a song on here that was in Venom, which I love. The fact that I love the song. I'm not, like I talked about the movie earlier, wasn't that big of a fan, but I did still enjoy it. Because it's not his best album, I can't put it high, and because it's not that classic Eminem that we were expecting, I still can't put it high. But it had to make the top 10 because it's still a good Eminem album, and it's his best album, like I said, in a long time. So there's that one. In 8th place, one I can't show you because I haven't got a physical copy of it, that is 7 by Beach House. This album I got to way too late. It came out the same day as another album that I'm going to talk about in a bit, and it just got overshadowed by that album. But I came back to it. It's that classic Beach House sound, but there's still hints of them changing the sound a little bit to make it sound brand new. It's their 7th studio album. It's great, and I just wish I got to it a little bit earlier, because the fact that it came out early in the year and it's on my top 10 is just incredible. And here's another one that came out really early this year that is on my top 10, and a big surprise. I wasn't expecting to like this album. but I checked it out and I loved it, and now it's in my top 10, number 7 to be exact, and that's Thunderbolt by Saxon. This album got me into Saxon as a band, and even got me interested in a lot more of this type of metal. I'm not a big fan, I wasn't a big fan of it before going into this, but after this, I really started to appreciate this a bit more. What do we have? We have Rainbow, Saxon obviously, Scorpions, Rush even. Still not a big Rush fan, but really did enjoy Saxon quite a bit, so yeah, definitely had to jump on that bandwagon. And in 6th place is going to another chilled one for me, and that is Blood Orange's Negro Swan. Alternative R&B at its best, I would say. Again, another chilled album, but does have some standout tracks. Charcoal Baby, great track. Chewing Gum, which is a track he did with A$AP Rocky, is my favourite track on the album. Out of Your League is another standout track. What else do we have? Orlando, the opening track is great. This whole album is just fantastic, and I think was very overlooked. It's on Domino label, so it's on the label of Arctic Monkeys, my favourite band, who I saw live earlier this year, like I said. This is one artist who I thought had a great 2018, and people didn't know it, because he had this album, and it is just a phenomenal piece of work that I wish got more recognition. So there it is, Blood Orange's Negro Swan, coming in as my 6th favourite album of the year. And what stops me from putting that album higher is the emotional attachment to the next 5, I guess. Well, 4, because there's one that I'll talk about that. You'll see. In 5th place for me, again I can't show you, but it's Evolution by Disturbed. I just remember the emotion of when they dropped the lead single off of this album. I think I listened to that thing about 9 or 10 times in a row at full volume. I loved it that much. This album for me, well, yes, there are standout tracks, and yes, it has that classic sound. This is one band I probably am getting in line to see live in May next year, around about my birthday time. But this band is incredible. I love Disturbed. They've always been a band that I've stuck with, even from the early days of being into music. So anytime they put out a new album, the emotion flows through me, and it just, as much as I don't like metal, this is one band I love. So Disturbed's Evolution for me is at number 5. At number 4, again I can't show you because it's not out over here yet on vinyl, and that is Anderson .Paak's Oxnard album. Originally this was going to be my number 1, but going back and listening to it, I do feel like Malibu, his previous project, was a better album altogether. When you listen to the album as a whole, it makes sense, but if you listen to individual tracks, there's nothing really that stands out. I mean, to me, Brothers Keeper stands out as the one track that I could listen to on its own, but everything else, if you don't listen to the album as a whole, it might not make sense. So for me, that's not what I want from an album. I do want an album that I can listen to individual tracks, but still have an album where I can still listen to the whole thing. So, but just because it's Anderson .Paak, I had to put him quite high on my list, so he's coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, and again, it pains me to put this artist this low, and this is probably the first time this band has actually made it this low on my list, and that is Arctic Monkeys with Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino. A few things to note about this album. Originally it was going to be a lot lower on my list because of how well it was received by fans. And it is the first album of theirs, I mean, because their first 5 albums peaked at number 1. This album I don't think peaked at number 1 because people didn't like it. But it's one of those albums you either love it or you hate it, you just can't tell. without loving it, without listening to it. But it's different from the rest of their sound because they've either had a post-punk revival sort of sound, garage rock, and then they've had indie rock as well. This is space rock at its best. Very Hawkwind reminiscent, but very, very, very good, in my opinion. And because he wrote this album on a piano instead of a guitar, that's why it has its different sound. And originally, even after discovering that, I was going to put this a lot lower. But after seeing them live, this album had to make it high on the list for me. Because there's something about hearing these songs live that really makes a difference to your perspective on these tracks. And you can definitely hear it. The difference between hearing them live and hearing them in the studio, they are overproduced on the album, but hearing them live you kind of hear them more raw, and it really does something to your ear for these songs, and that kind of twisted it for me. So for me, Arctic Monkeys' 6th album, Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino, is coming in as my third best album of the year. But if I had to pick a favourite, it would be this, because it has been the one that I've played the most out of all of these. In second place is an album I think again was very overlooked this year, and that's Walk Between Worlds by Simple Minds. My introduction to them, maybe not a great introduction, but I loved this album from front to back. I even got the deluxe edition with the bonus tracks, and I love all these bonus tracks. It's just an incredible album, and I love Simple Minds even more now. Again, very overlooked, but a very well done album, a very good summer album, even though it came out at the beginning of the year, and it's still in my top 3. In fact, 2 of these albums came out at the beginning of the year and still somehow made my top 3, so these guys obviously did something right. Every track on here is a winner. There is not a bad track on this album, except for if you've got the deluxe edition. Maybe Dirty Old Town, the live version, wouldn't connect with you that well, but everything else on this is very, very, very good for me. So, Simple Minds, Walk Between Worlds is my second best album of the year. And my number 1 pick, again I can't show you because I don't have a physical copy. Is it my favourite album of this year? No. Is it? But I do think it's the best album of the year, and that is Kids See Ghosts' self-titled album, Kids See Ghosts. I'm not a Kanye West fan. Okay, I want to put that out there, but I think he's had one of the best 2018s of anybody. He had 4 albums this year that he's worked on, I think 5 even, 2 of which are solo works, and 3 of them have been, and all 5 of them have been his production. This is by far the best work Kanye has put out, in my opinion, since he did his debut album, The College Dropout. Very chilled, very different sound, but him and Kid Cudi getting together and making this masterpiece of an album, I genuinely think, even though it's not my favourite album of the year, it's not an album I've talked about much this year, I think it is the best album that we've got in 2018. You may disagree with me if you're not a hip-hop fan. I'm not really a fan of Kanye West, but I think this album was very, very well done. So for me, Kids See Ghosts is my number 1 album of the year. And with that, that is going to conclude my 2018 roundup. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your top 10 list of this year would be, album wise. I kind of see a lot of you putting Paul McCartney on there, I'm not going to lie. That's going to be it for this video. I hope to see you guys in 2019, and hope you guys have a great New Year's. Peace.